Hey everyone, welcome back to Mr. Geopolitics. So today we're going to discuss the latest developments in Ukraine for October the 4th. I've been away for a few days, but now I'm back. Anyway, so let's get right into it. So right now, the Russians are definitely on the back foot, and they are losing territory at a staggering rate. And what they're trying to do is get it under control. Recently, we all know how the Russians lost a big chunk of territory in the Kharkiv region, right? And then for several weeks there was fighting over Liman, the region of Liman right here, Liman and Yampil. And several times the Ukrainians were repelled. They attempted to they crossed the Seversky Donets River. And several times they were repelled and they had to flee with losses, but eventually the Ukrainians took this settlement right here, and then they went to Yarova, and from Yarova they were able to outflank the Russians from the north, and that was basically the end of the story. Anyways, so Liman has fallen, and also Bilohorivka fell, I believe, a week and a half ago or so, or 2 weeks ago. So the next target might very well be Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. But I don't think those are going to be very easy targets, because the Russians fought very hard for those cities. These are twin cities, by the way. They call them twin cities. They fought very hard for these cities, and I don't think they're going to let them go without a fight. So the Russians are allegedly they've already sent they've sent some engineering groups here, and they're already setting up defensive lines all along here. So they're anticipating frontal assault. But the Ukrainians have other options as well. Another important settlement that the Russians have to defend, if they want to defend Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, is Crimea. They're also setting up trenches and fortifications at Crimea, because if the Ukrainians take this settlement, then they will be able to outflank the Russians from the north, just like they did at Liman. Now, will the Russians be able to hold off the Ukrainians until their reserves can come into play, or until the conscripts can be sent in? Well, only time will tell. But if you look at the map right now, previously the Russians fell back to the Oskil River, right? So this is the Oskil River right here, approximately where this blue, if you follow the blue line, approximately, because there's this, the Oskil River also goes here. Anyways, the Russians have now fallen several kilometers east of the Oskil River, and now there's a gray zone between the Oskil River and the Russian lines. So the Russian front lines are now right at the border of the Luhansk Oblast. So previously, the Russians controlled the Luhansk Oblast, all the borders of the Luhansk Oblast right here, and they also controlled, even when they fell back from that major Ukrainian offensive, when they fell back behind the Oskil River, east of the Oskil River, they still controlled some of the territory of the Kharkiv Oblast. But now, this territory in white, they've lost that, so it's basically a gray zone. Most likely, the Russians they've probably abandoned most of these settlements at this point. So basically, the Russians only now control the territory of the Luhansk People's Republic, or I guess it's not the Luhansk People's Republic anymore, because a few days ago the Russian separatist states, they held very quick what do you call it, referendums. They held very quick referendums, and the results came in as expected. All of the settlements, all of the states voted to join Russia. Big surprise there. And the whole process is being rushed through. It's a lengthy process, but it's being rushed through. And if it already, I'm pretty sure that it's already, these areas are officially now a part of the Russian Federation. But if they aren't now, they will be in a few hours. So regardless, within a day or two, no matter what, these areas will be considered as part of Russia proper. They will be considered, all these areas will be considered a part of the Russian Federation. So basically, now the Russians have lost Liman, the territory of Liman, and like I said, Severodonetsk is the biggest concern right now. Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. But the next biggest first of all, the only area where the Russians have gained territory, it's kind of funny, but the Russians have actually gained some territory, and the only area where they have gained territory is right here. You have Pisky right here, the Pisky sector, where the Russians fought for, I think, well over a month to secure this area. And I heard a report today that they've expanded their control over this sector, but whether they will be able to consolidate that control remains to be seen. I'm not sure. It might just be a distraction for the Ukrainians. I don't know. We'll see about that. Another option for the Ukrainians is to attack the Zaporizhia region. And the Ukrainians basically, right now, time is against them, because in a few months, something like 300,000 Russian in a few days to a few weeks, because Russia has around 250,000 conscripts, I believe. So within a few days to a few weeks, 50,000, 100,000 or more conscripts will be pouring in to plug all the gaps. And within a few months, probably either in the winter sometime, if the Russians choose to launch a winter offensive, or next year in February, March, right in time for spring, there will be 300,000 new Russian reserves who will be well equipped and be sent to the front lines. So time is now against the Ukrainians, and if the Ukrainians can basically, if they can send troops in here into Zaporizhia, and they can actually make it to the coast, maybe take the city of Mariupol, that would be very devastating for the Russians, because if the Ukrainians can do that, they would basically be cutting the Russian land bridge in half. So the Donbass would be separated from the Kherson region and the Zaporizhia region and Crimea. So there have been rumors and reports about the Ukrainians building up forces in this area, and there have been several attempted large-scale attacks in this area, but so far all of them have been repelled. But that doesn't mean that they will be repelled forever. I mean, as long as the Ukrainians keep trying, they might eventually have a breakthrough, right? But anyways, right now, another big event which has happened is that the Kherson front line in the north has basically fallen apart for the Russians. The Russians have been fighting for this area for months, and recently they decided to withdraw from the area. And why did they do this? Well, there wasn't any big battle or clash or anything like that. They basically withdrew from these territories, and if you look at what I've drawn out here, it'll make more sense. If you measure the new front line that the Russians now have to defend, it's 60 kilometers wide, or 35 miles about, right? 60 kilometers or 35 miles. The old line of defense, the old front line, was 105 odd kilometers or 65 miles. So basically, the Russians have cut the front line that they have to defend in half. Why did they do this? Probably because the Ukrainians were putting too much pressure on them, and they knew that the situation was untenable. So they decided to save their manpower, save their men, and withdraw to a more defendable position. And at this point in time, this gives the Ukrainians a couple options. Some are saying that the Ukrainians are planning to actually cross the river right here, make a river crossing. I'm not sure if they can cross large amounts of armor over. I'm not sure if it'll be successful, but this could be one option. They could cross over and try to go towards the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which they've been at the town of Enerhodar, which the Ukrainians have been wanting to take back for quite a while. And at the same time, they could launch an attack from the east. And so they could launch a simultaneous attack towards the town of Enerhodar. And they could launch several attacks from Nikopol, for example, amphibious attacks. All the previous attempts failed, but that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that another coordinated attack wouldn't fail, especially if it was supported by attacks by land at the same time. But anyways, that's just one option. But we're just gonna have to wait and see what happens, because the Russians right now, basically what they have to do is hunker down and defend their territory like their life depends on it. Defend all of this territory like their life depends on it. And the Ukrainians have to try to take as much territory like their life depends on it, because in the Western media and the corporate media, you hear a lot about how a lot of Russians are fleeing en masse. They're fleeing Russia. They're trying to avoid the being conscripted. They're trying to avoid being mobilized. But I don't know how much truth there is to that, because in reality, I mean, the fact of the matter is that the mainstream media focuses a lot on the reserves, the 2 million reserves that Russia has. But out of that 2 million, Russia is only going to be calling up 300,000. So that's 15%. So out of 2 million reserves, if you're a reserve, your chances of being drawn up are basically 1 in 10. 15 and 10. 1.5 and 10. So another thing to keep in mind is that under Russian law, no conscripts can be sent into a war zone. Conscripts can only be sent into war, into a battlefield to defend Russian territory. And that's why the Russians have been pushing this, have held these successive referendums recently, and that's why they've been pushing it through so quickly through the parliaments and whatnot, through the judicial system, because the Russians want to get the reserves mobilized as soon as possible. But more important than the reserves, in my mind, is the conscripts, because the conscripts are already uniformed soldiers. They're already soldiers. They're already in full-time training, and the Russians can send, like I said, they have something like 250,000 or more conscripts. So the Russians can send 50,000 to 100,000 or more conscripts into Ukraine almost immediately. The mainstream media doesn't really talk about that, but they mostly focus on the reserves. But the thing is, even with the reserves, I mean, there's no way that 2 million people are going to be able to flee Russia. There's just no way. And there's also a lot of footage out there of people kissing their families goodbye, and people waving flags as buses take soldiers away to training centers. So, I mean, Russian people are very patriotic, and not everyone is going to try their best to avoid conscription. I mean, during the Vietnam War, a lot of Americans tried to avoid conscription. I think hundreds of thousands migrated to Canada. So, anyways, there's always going to be people who are going to avoid conscription and do everything they can to avoid being conscripted or being sent to war. But anyways, out of the 2 million reserves, I read a report so far that half of the reserves that Russia had called up, half of the potential candidates had been rejected because they were not fit for service. So either they were too out of shape or whatever, they had health issues or whatever it may be. So out of the 300,000 that they initially called up, half of them were not fit for service. But that's okay, because they have more than 1.5 million more. So they will definitely be able to train 300,000 troops, and they will definitely be able to arm them. They have more than enough weapons. I've discussed this in previous videos. And as far as the reserves are concerned, basically reserves are people who were in the army previously, who were conscripted in the army, or who were full-time soldiers previously, and now what a reserve is basically once a week or once every 2 weeks they go out for a few hours and they train just to hone their skills, just to keep their skills sharp. So anyways, it's gonna take time to see what happens next, but we're gonna keep watching, and only time will tell. We'll see what happens next. Anyways, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.